Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, I had a voice radio. So today, we're going to be looking at literally the most annoying Pokemon deck that there has ever been. Although, as always, if you think you can find a more annoying one, that is why they invented the comment section. Ladies and gentlemen, I've got a deck today which aims to just stop your opponent playing the game at all. We're going to give them a 0-card hand. We are going to make sure they don't top deck anything good. We are going to make sure that they can't attack. So, without further ado, let's start with Red Card. Red Card came around in X and Y, but has been kept in the format due to the reprint in Generations. And what Red Card does is it forces your opponent to shuffle their hand into their deck and draw 4 cards. Now ideally you go first and do this on the first turn of the game so that your opponent starts the game with a 4-card hand. Now this is important because we can take them from a 4-card hand and put them down to a 0-card hand. Now we do have a couple of other options that we could use instead of Red Card. The best of which being the Marshadow from Shining Legends, which does the same thing except it also gives you a hand of 4 cards. Now this is especially good on turn 1 because in theory on turn 1 you do whatever you need to do and then Marshadow just acts as a little bit of shuffle draw, whereas your opponent gets put to a 4-card hand from hopefully a 6-card hand, assuming they only start with one basic Pokemon. So Marshadow does the exact same thing. Now you can also achieve the same effect using the supporter card Judge, and remember nowadays we can search that out on turn 1 of the game using Tapu Lele, but we're going to need a supporter card in a minute to really hurt our opponent. So we really want to be doing it with Red Card or Marshadow. Either will do. You can use Judge, but Judge kind of falls down. Now, it's not necessarily a turn 1 thing to do, although in the mid to late game, if your opponent's got a hand of 4 cards or fewer, might I suggest peeking Red Card. It's coming out in Crimson Invasion, and it says that your opponent reveals their hand, and you can either make them keep their hand, or shuffle their hand back into their deck. Now, we've got a bunch of other disrupting options to go here, ladies and gentlemen. So, essentially, you see what you've got, and you can look at your opponent's hand. If you think you can disrupt their hand beautifully, then you just make them keep their hand. If they've got too many outs to the annoying things that you want to do, you make them shuffle their hand back in. Peeking Red Card is not a substitute for Red Card because they might have an 8-card hand. And even if you give them a new 8-card hand, they'll probably draw out of it. But keep peeking Red Card in mind. So at this stage, we've played a Red Card. They've only got 4 cards in their hand. Might I suggest playing Delinquent? Delinquent is a supporter card where, now there's got to be a stadium in play, we'll talk about that in a moment, but assuming there is a stadium in play, you can discard the stadium in play, and if you do, your opponent discards 3 cards from his or her hand. So first you use Red Card to put them down to a 4-card hand, then you use Delinquent to make them discard 3 of those cards, leaving them with a 1-card hand. Sound good? It should, because there are basically very few things your opponent can do with a 1-card hand. Maybe they keep a Tapu Lele, in which case they can use Wonder Tag and search out a supporter, in which case, annoying, but these things happen. But let's say they've got an Ultra Ball. Well, they can keep an Ultra Ball in their hand, but at the beginning of their next turn, they draw a card. They then have a 2-card hand. Well, you can't play Ultra Ball with a 2-card hand, so Ultra Ball doesn't do anything. Maybe they keep a supporter, but as we're going to see in a minute, that's not going to do them any good. So really, unless they've got a Tapu Lele already in hand, and they keep it, we're now putting them down to a essentially useless 1-card hand using Delinquent. Now, as we've got to discard a stadium in order to play Delinquent, we don't want to be relying on our opponent to have a stadium. We need to play our own. What is the most annoying disruptive stadium card there is? Well, we've actually got 2 options here. Option number 1, we can play Parallel City, put your opponent down to a free Pokemon bench. Now I know when you get rid of it with Delinquent, it's then going to open up their bench again, but the idea here is to try and run them out of options. In theory, by the time you discard that Parallel City with Delinquent and open up their bench again, they've got a 0-card useless hand, and then we can laugh in their face. And of course they want bench sitters like Octillery and Oranguru sitting down there, and that's going to be a lot more difficult if you put them down to a free Pokemon bench. They might keep them, but then they're going to be running out of attackers. As a side note here, it's not really where we're going with this particular video, but might I suggest running Garboda as well here, purely because it stops the Tapu Lele play, and it also stops Oranguru and Octillery, all the things they would use to draw themselves out of a 0-card hand are essentially ability-based Pokemon, and we can get rid of them using Garboda. The other option we've got here is the upcoming Sea of Nothingness from Crimson Invasion, which decrees that Pokemon that evolve or devolve no longer get rid of special conditions as they usually would. As we're going to see in a minute, we do like special conditions, so if you're not feeling Parallel City, maybe consider Sea of Nothingness. So after a red card and a Delinquent, they've got a 1-card hand, which basically is going to either be a Tapu Lele or a supporter, or they're going to have nothing to do. At which case, and I don't think I've ever really said this before in a video, but that is the perfect time for Tormenting Spray. An item card which basically never gets used. You get to choose a random card from your opponent's hand, and if it's a supporter card, your opponent discards it. Usually this is way too unreliable to actually use, but in this deck, your opponent is generally going to discard the cards from their hand, keep a supporter, basically going, look, okay, 1-card hand, but I'll make that card a supporter, I can live with this. Oh no, they can't, because in comes Tormenting Spray and discards it. Essentially, the only good thing they can have in their hand at this stage is a Tapu Lele, or else they've got nothing to do the following turn. And yes, I am aware that they might top deck out of it. There's nothing we can do about that if they do. Then, of course, we've got the issue, like I just said. What if your opponent top decks out of it? And I said, well, there's nothing we can do. That, ladies and gentlemen, that was a lie. A little bit of tension building. Because actually there is something we can do. We can use the Absol from Guardians Rising that for a single darkness energy says look at the top 4 cards of either player's deck and put them back in any order. So what you do is you just keep rearranging the top cards of your opponent's deck. If they've got basic Pokemon but nothing to attack with, you feed them energy that they don't need. If they've got Pokemon to attack with but no energy, you feed them more pointless Pokemon they can't use. Sooner or later, this will fail. Sooner or later, you're going to have to give them a good top deck, because sooner or later they're going to have 4 supporters lined up or 4 energy lined up. But of course, we can keep going with this, and it sounds like an awful lot of fun to me. And at this stage, you're rolling. Red card to put them down to a 4-card hand, Delinquent to put them down to a 1-card hand, Tormenting Spray to get rid of the supporter they've probably kept, and then you play an Absol to use Future Sight to make sure they don't top deck anything. Will this work consistently in every game you play? Almost certainly not. Will it lock your opponent out of the game entirely when it works? Oh, good lordy, yes, it will. Now, at this stage, maybe your opponent is actually sitting there with a Pokemon that can attack. Well, that's no good. We need to stop that, and we've got a couple of options here. One of my favourites, Nihilego GX from the upcoming Crimson Invasion expansion, which has got the ability, when you play this Pokemon from your hand to your bench, both active Pokemon are now poisoned and confused. So now if your opponent tries to attack, even if they've got an attacker of course, they flip a coin. If tails, the attack fails and they take 30 damage. And of course they sit there and take poison damage the whole time as well. You could consider Survivor here, but we've got enough of a combo going on here, ladies and gentlemen, that maybe it's worth just leaving it for a moment. poison will do fine. The other option, of course, we've got here is Salazzle. Salazzle has got a really annoying ability that when you evolve it up, your opponent is burned and poisoned. So they don't get the confusion, but they take extra damage counters from burn as well as poison. It's still going to be pretty darned annoying. And if you want to finish off our little deck here and get the most annoying, both Garbodas. This one to turn off ability so that stuff like Octillery, Oranguru and Tapu Lele can't draw them out of this. And this one because, well, what is your opponent going to try and do? Oh no, I'm poisoned, etc. Better play a switch or a floatstone. Well, they're items. Oh no, I'm going to be locked out of the game next turn. I'd better get set up as quickly as I can. How do you get set up quickly? Playing items. Oh no, I'm being delinquented. I've got items in my hand. What are you going to discard? Items. This is a kind of deck that forces your opponent to play slightly more recklessly than they might otherwise like. That is where Garboda really shines, and it's all for a psychic energy. So if you can pull off Red Card, Delinquent, Tormenting Spray, Absol, Nihilego, you will basically win the game, and then you've got Garboda to come in and be annoying. This is not a combo you're going to be able to pull off every turn in every game, but it will work sometimes, and when it works, you will win and it will be fun. But as always in these kind of videos, I'm telling you this is the most annoying Pokemon deck ever. Well, I would like it if you considered that as a challenge, so in the comment section, let me know if you found one that's more annoying. Go nuts, but remember the rule. Be nice. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts, etc., you can do so at patreon.com/PTCGRadio. But by far the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.